The head of the network security PS division of Ultima, and today we're talking to you about Checkpoint's Infinity model and around how that allows you to protect yourselves from the latest cyber attacks that everyone's facing in the industry. So first, a little bit of housekeeping. So in terms of the webinar, everyone's going to be on mute for the duration of the call. So that's just to ensure that everyone can hear okay. But we do ask that we're happy to take questions, keep it interactive. So on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar screen, you should have a little question section. Please feel free to ask any questions and we'll pause at appropriate moments as we go through to answer those where relevant. And just before we start, just going to do a quick poll just to see who we've got on the call today in terms of different customer spreads. So if everyone's okay just to put a quick vote, this will just allow us to sort of tailor the content to everyone appropriately in terms of if you are an existing Checkpoint customer and what kind of equipment you've got on site today. So just give everyone a second to go through and vote for that. Yeah, do that. All right, okay, that's good. Everyone's there. So, right, thank you for that. So that allows us to just make sure we give you the right content. So let me close that down. Perfect. Right. So we'll start off with just a bit of an overview as to what the kind of where the model starts, I guess, and what's kind of the reasons behind Checkpoint coming up with this concept. So, in terms of kind of looking at the industry today and where we are, everyone's facing challenges in terms of cybersecurity and risk and problems. And these days, there's a lot of focus on it. So, as an example, the World Economic Forum have put through their sort of annual report of risks. And these days, cyber attacks is actually one of the most sort of expected and most severe impacting issues that can occur. So that one's shown there on a zoom in there. So previously that just wouldn't exist. You can see the other things on there, like weather and natural disasters, but cyber attacks is now deemed to be a big issue. And if you look in terms of other risks, so the ones there in purple are the ones that are relevant to us today. So these are the ones that are relevant to cybersecurity. And you can see 5 of these over the last 3 years have been relevant to cybersecurity. So it's a big issue that everyone's facing, governments, big companies, small companies, everyone's seeing it, both at home and at work. So it's something we need to try and look at. So in terms of what is the problem? So this is a pretty complex, a hectic slide that shows different areas that we're looking at. And these are different attack vectors on top and different security technologies on the left-hand side. And you can see that there's a large crossover between those two in terms of how many different things have to be considered and factored in when you're trying to come up with a solution for different areas and how to protect it to ensure it's kept secure. So these are the kind of challenges that I'm sure those of you on the call today have faced in the past. And that's what we're going to try and learn how we can and sort of get a level of protection for it. So in terms of what Checkpoint have done over the last year is kind of try to, I'll fill the slide out so it's a bit easier to see. I've tried to look through what kind of technologies we've seen over the last sort of 20 or so years, since the internet's existed. So traditionally, AV was pretty much what everyone had back in the day. That was deemed all that's necessary. There wasn't really any threats outside of those kind of things that occurred. So the internet was very immature in those days. So very few people had it, so it wasn't really a problem. That then evolved to when the internet sort of started to become more usable and more companies had it. And that's where the file was invented. So that's obviously where Checkpoint started back in the day. Was creating a device that protected you from the internet. As that progressed through, the internet got more and more popular. More people used it, bandwidth was increasing, that kind of thing. And then people started working out that they could host websites and applications through their files. And then, as a result of that, people could exploit issues in those. So that's where intrusion prevention came in. So for a lot of companies, and even still today, intrusion prevention is actually intrusion detection. Not everyone is still running things in prevent mode. But this is kind of where it's the first sort of next generation sort of threat protection started. And then as we go into the last 10 years, we started to see things like sandboxing technology, so the ability to take content, load it up in an isolated environment, work out if it's malicious or not, and give a decision. And technology from along the lines of anti-bot, so looking at malware that's sitting on your machine that's sort of checking out to a command and control server in one of the Far East or something like that. And that's where more damage can be done. And in terms of how that aligns to what businesses are doing, so everyone has AV, it's deemed to be the done thing. Everyone has a firewall. Intrusion prevention, varies. And sandboxing and anti-bot is something that very few people do. So it's something that is definitely, new threats are coming out, but people aren't necessarily being protected. So mapping that out, that kind of gives you the sort of the timeline of threats versus dates, and some stats based on some of the information Checkpoint get from their reports is that the average enterprise is kind of sat somewhere around between Gen 2 and Gen 3. We know from our customer base we've got a mixture of customers that have absolutely cutting edge technology and can block everything, right down to others that sit at the other end of the scale. So the future is going to change, and even more threats are going to come in. IoT devices are becoming common. People need to work out what they're, how to protect those. Everyone's got multiple devices these days, and it's a different challenge. So some of the stats that came out from the research that was done last year, there was 97% of enterprises are not protected from the very latest kind of attacks, which is a pretty scary stats. And these days, people are being hit by this. So what's the reason behind people saying this is the case? A lot of it comes down to complexity. So most companies these days we work with, they've got a small IT team. They're not huge. There's not a bank of SOC analysts sort of reviewing everything that's going on. A lot of people don't really think it's a problem. So a lot of people put some protection in. The FD refuses to sign something off until something happens. When that does happen, the sign off comes very quickly. So that's a typical thing we see quite often. A lot of people also have too many products. So, product overload means that things aren't being run effectively. We're not making best use of the tech you've already got in-house, and that creates its own challenges. People we've spoken about already in terms of, not being enough people there. And the common one, it's just, hiding behind the fact that it won't happen. But unfortunately these days it's not, when you'll get attacked, if you'll get attacked, you will get attacked at some point. It's just about the severity and how that's handled is what's key. So if we look at what the typical approach that was done in the past few years, that we saw this across most of our customers. At one point it was best of breed and the done thing to have loads of different technologies. You must have a different vendor from different layers, and there's still arguments to say the pros and cons of that. But there are some sort of benefits and disadvantages of doing that approach. So having lots of technologies becomes complex. So you have lots of different things, all overlapping. Nobody's really understanding them in any detail. You can have gaps, so different products may have 80% of what you need, but not the final piece, but because you've got other technology, you think it may be well covered. And the other thing we're seeing these days is where attacks are so much more complicated, you need a way of understanding what happened and sort of post-remediation, cleanup activities, that kind of thing. So what we're seeing a lot of people doing in the sort of last couple of years certainly is looking at a different approach, where we can unify that those different technology stacks into one big solution. So a single management platform, different product components still making up the suite. So cloud is relevant, mobiles, devices, your network. But the advantage you get from that is simplicity, lower cost, and hopefully lower support overhead. So you're not managing different products. You're not having to maintain different firmware versions and upgrades and patching and that kind of thing. You've got one solution that's centrally managed and centrally deployed. And that kind of maps across to what we're seeing in the future. So, the previous attacks we're seeing, evolved. So, the WannaCries and ransomwares and those kind of things. Things are getting more complex. So, country-based, large-scale attacks are taking place. So this covers, these days everyone's getting the sort of dodgy text messages and things on their mobiles that are just the different vectors that people are trying to use to attack you. And a lot of the time it is state-sponsored. So a country is directly going after another country for political reasons or other reasons that that they're doing in the background. And these are the kind of challenges people are facing. So as a result of that, we kind of know we need to do something more. So traditionally, as we mentioned earlier on in the slides, detection was very common from an intrusion perspective, and it still is today. We see an awful lot of our customers not running with prevention on IPS. So a lot of breaches that we're seeing, and I know some of the big ones that have been in the news over the last year, there's been sort of follow-ups in some of the tech industry saying that had they run intrusion prevention on their solutions, those breaches would never have occurred. So that's definitely something we need to do. Things need to take place in real time. We can't wait 4 hours or 12 hours for a signature to update. It's just not viable anymore. So the old model of traditional AV with a sort of daily signature update just doesn't work. And a lot of people don't really think about the weak points. So cloud and mobile are probably the biggest two we see. So there's a sort of myth going around that if you buy Microsoft Azure or AWS, they provide the security for you. Hopefully most people know these days that's not the case. They kind of, it's a shared responsibility around cloud. And mobile is very much an emerging tech. So a few years ago, people just didn't do security for their mobile devices. These days, it's something that we're seeing more and more the need to do so. So that's across Android and iOS. Is very common. So in terms of what does it look like when you're trying to consolidate this? So it's a single management platform covering all the different areas of your network. So cloud, data center, endpoint, and mobile. And having that as a single consolidated approach. So you'll be able to see everything that's going on in one place, one policy pushes out to everything. And in terms of the way that looks, we've got a single dashboard that's delivering that. So let's browse through to this. So this dashboard can handle all these different components. So there's lots of them appear in there. And it's right down to device level, covering things like Wi-Fi, right through to your mobile on the phone, the cloud. All these different components are what the solution is made up of, and you'll see things that traditionally would not be what you'd expect a firewall to do. So DLPs in there, SaaS level security for sort of the Office 365 and other cloud-based solutions, and it's all managed by a single dashboard. So this single interface gives you access and a view of all of these areas, and the key thing is that the intelligence between those is shared. So that if you see an issue come in at one of your entry points in the cloud, very quickly that is then propagated out to all your other areas, so devices, your other networks, your data centers, so that same threat can't go any further. So what exactly is Infinity? So Infinity is a two-part solution. One is a sort of an architecture, and the second is a way of purchasing a product, which is a very different approach to what most other companies sort of offer. So it's about having a real-time threat prevention solution. So no longer signature-based. It's powered by ThreatCloud, which we'll cover shortly on the next slides. The intelligence, as I say, then is propagated between each different component, and then within that we've got a single management platform which is used across all the areas, so you can see everything in one place. So you're not having to check different GUIs. You're not having to log into a portal for one thing and a management console for another. Everything's seen in a single place. And obviously we said that a large number of people on this call are quite new to Checkpoint, so this slide is a pretty good overview of what Checkpoint can do. So again, in the past, a lot of people just thought of Checkpoint as a firewall vendor. Those days are gone. So these are the different areas that they can cover, and you can see it's a large spread. And some of the newer things in there around the cloud side of things is the SaaS protections there. Cloud compliance and sort of automation and orchestration features are there, so that's across multiple cloud platforms. The traditional is in the bottom right corner with network, and endpoint on the bottom left covering Windows, Mac devices, that kind of thing. And the key thing is all of this is linked together with ThreatCloud, which is Checkpoint's sort of central intelligence solution. So it's just a cloud-based solution that all their products check into. So to try and explain how that works, we'll give you a little example. So this is a sort of an example of the kind of things that most companies see. So 11:30 a.m. One of the users receives an email. That email's got an attachment that was blocked. So what happened is that the solution is in place has worked out that particular attachment is not normal. There's something malicious inside that. That's been found by the sandbox. So from that, very quickly they can work out, okay, well, there's a device that's being communicated to. So that's shown up at the top there, the pwnoun.hack.evil. That IP address and host name is then automatically exposed via ThreatCloud as an indicator to say that we know this is now malicious. So ThreatCloud has very quickly, for both, if this is one company, they've sort of shared that with that individual company, but as well as that, all other Checkpoint customers, so everyone benefits from each other's sort of content and knowledge. So that's then sent out automatically to mobile devices to say this is now known as malicious. So if somebody happens to be on their mobile phone rather than being in the office, that link can be automatically blocked. Same concept in the cloud. So a machine in the cloud is then seen to be doing something there. That information can also be updated again all via ThreatCloud to have one single sort of policy that's gone through. So everything's shared between each other, and that kind of gives you a much better level of sort of security and protection. So if that was I guess the key message is that if that was a separate system, that would be a problem. The three different solutions eventually would catch up, but that could be 24 or 48 hours later. So it's very much around having everything done in one place. So in terms of how does the model work, this is where this is probably one of the more unique pieces of the component. So the idea is that you kind of say, you buy into Checkpoint's vision. So, we've known from the previous slides that Checkpoint can do a lot of things that everyone's trying to do today. So this covers, all your different areas of protection you need to think about today. You have a cost per user per year, so it's a user-based solution. It's not looking at your network or your data centers or anything like that. And then essentially, and some of these areas are flexible in terms of how this is a approach, but this is a sort of an indication as to how it will work. A percentage of your pot that is allocated as part of this is used towards hardware. So this could be used to buy a data center firewall or an office firewall that you may want to deploy. You then have a percentage that's available towards training, incident response, or professional services. So that could be that some of the people on the call today said they're new to Checkpoint. So that would be a way of getting courses to show you, how does the tech work. You may want to get certified or have your tech certified in that area. So some of that funds can go to that, and as part of it, you get support included. So that's 24/7, and that can either be via us as a reseller or directly to Checkpoint, depending on which model you go for. So drilling into that into a little bit more detail. So as you say, it's essentially a sort of an allocation of budget towards the hardware credit. So some people say we don't need hardware, so we can look at there's different options for cloud gateways or software gateways. So it's not prescriptive that it must be done like this. But essentially, you kind of buy the relevant hardware needed for your environment. You can buy that up front, and depending on how it's purchased, to deploy bigger kit early on. That can be replaced as part of a sort of ongoing refresh cycle with the hardware you've got. And by default, you get Checkpoint's top level of protection. So NGTX is their sort of most advanced tier of sort of add-on in terms of protection. So this is giving you the zero-day sandblast technology, which includes sandboxing, the anti-bot technology we talked about before, that kind of thing. So you've got the top tier of protection across all the hardware gateways that you need. And as you said, you can then add into this software side of things. So this could be cloud gateways, it could be VMware virtual gateways. So this is very flexible based on exactly what's required in terms of the scenario you've got. So this covers things like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Office 365 with the SaaS side of things. So it's a real mix and match of products and solutions. So also included is endpoint. So that's your clients' mobiles from a mobile perspective. So the idea is a single sort of solution as such, single product. It gives you a one-size-fits-all for exactly what you need. So from there, you can then obviously just deploy as much as you like of this technology. It's designed to be a very flexible approach. So it's just you've committed to Checkpoint, so you get access to their sort of their vision and their concept as and when new products come into this in the future. So if Checkpoint bring out something new, because you've got their Infinity Total Protection architecture, you'll be able to go ahead and get those new products too. So it's just anything is available to you. And that's basically it. So it's a slightly different way of looking at things. It's not something we've seen many other security vendors offer this kind of approach. But it's something we find that if it's something that's of interest, we're happy to talk through this in a bit more detail, go through how it worked with your company, give you some sort of idea of what kind of the costs are. But for most people who do see the vision, it should be a cheaper, cost-effective approach for a number of years rather than individual products. That's looking at both individual product costs, but also the ownership side of things in terms of support, patching, understanding the product features and that kind of thing. So that's basically all we've got to cover today. If there's any questions, we'll give everyone a minute to see if there's any questions, and then we'll come back to you shortly. Okay, so it looks like no questions. So that's great. So we'll send these slides out to everyone, so that you've got a copy of these to review afterwards. And as you say, if anyone wants to have a more detailed chat about how this works in your exact environment, more than happy to have a chat. So if your account manager will send out the details of the slides out to you, and feel free to ask any further questions. We're happy to take those offline. So thanks everyone for joining, and have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.